She's too dark to be cute. The cruel words cut the room, but when a black single dad stood tall and answered with fire, 3 powerful CEOs were left speechless, and the truth no one expected came crashing down. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Marcus Johnson smoothed down his navy suit jacket one last time as he and his daughter Aaliyah sat in the pristine waiting room of Bradford Academy. The leather chairs squeaked softly beneath them, and the air smelled of lemon polish and fresh flowers. Through tall windows, morning sunlight streamed in, making the brass fixtures gleam. "Remember, baby girl," Marcus whispered, leaning close to 9-year-old Aaliyah, "just be yourself in there. That's all they need to see." He reached over to adjust the yellow ribbon in her carefully braided hair. Aaliyah's small fingers fidgeted with the hem of her yellow dress. "What if they don't like me, Daddy?" Marcus's heart squeezed at the worry in her voice. "They're going to love you," he assured her, though his own stomach churned with anxiety. This interview could change everything for Aaliyah's future. Bradford Academy was the best private school in the city, with resources his daughter deserved. Around them, other families waited their turn. Men in expensive suits checked their watches while women in designer clothes scrolled through their phones. Their children sat unnaturally still in pressed uniforms from their current private schools. Aaliyah pulled her notebook from her small backpack, the one where she wrote her stories and drew pictures. Marcus smiled, watching her flip through pages filled with her neat handwriting and colorful illustrations. His daughter had such a beautiful mind, always creating and imagining. "Look, Daddy," she whispered, pointing to her latest drawing. "It's us in the garden with Mommy's roses." The crayon sketch showed 3 stick figures among red flowers, though one figure had wings and a halo. Marcus swallowed hard. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, drawing strength from her presence, just as she did from his. A sharp whisper cut through the quiet room. "She's too dark to be cute." The words, spoken by an elegantly dressed woman to her husband, sliced through the air like a knife. Though meant to be private, they carried clearly in the hushed space. Marcus felt Aaliyah's tiny hand clench in his. Her shoulders stiffened, and the notebook slipped from her lap, landing with a soft thud on the polished floor. The crayon drawing of their family peeked out from its pages. Pain and anger surged through Marcus's chest, hot and fierce. But years of facing such moments had taught him a different way to respond. He took a deep breath, squeezing his daughter's hand gently. Rising slowly to his feet, Marcus's voice carried clearly but calmly through the waiting room. "Ma'am," he said, addressing the woman who had whispered, "I couldn't help but overhear your comment about my daughter." The woman's face flushed red, and her husband shifted uncomfortably. Near the reception desk, 3 men in business suits, members of the school board, paused their conversation to listen. "My daughter's skin," Marcus continued, his voice steady and warm, "is the color of rich earth that grows the most beautiful flowers. It's the shade of the soil my grandmother tilled to feed her family, the color that carries the strength and dignity of generations." He placed his hand on Aaliyah's shoulder as she stood beside him, her chin lifting slightly. "Her complexion holds the stories of our ancestors, their struggles and their triumphs. But more than that, it's exactly the shade God intended when he crafted her in his perfect wisdom." Marcus's words filled the waiting room with quiet power. He looked at my daughter and said, "This is exactly how I want her to be." And he was right. She's absolutely beautiful. The silence in the room grew thick. The woman who had whispered now stared at her expensive shoes, her face burning. Her husband couldn't meet Marcus's eyes. The 3 CEOs by the desk stood frozen, papers forgotten in their hands. Aaliyah looked up at her father, her eyes bright with unshed tears and pride. Marcus knelt down to her level, picking up her fallen notebook. "Baby girl," he said softly, but loud enough for others to hear, "do you remember what we say every morning when you look in the mirror?" Aaliyah's voice came out small but clear. "I am fearfully and wonderfully made." "That's right," Marcus smiled, touching her cheek gently. "Every single part of you, from your beautiful brown skin to your brilliant mind, is exactly as it should be. Don't let anyone ever make you doubt that." One of the CEOs cleared his throat, clearly affected by the scene. Another dabbed discreetly at her eyes, with a tissue. The third just stood there, his mouth slightly open, as if seeing something he'd never noticed before. Marcus gathered Aaliyah into a tight hug, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck. He could feel her heart beating against his chest, strong and steady despite the hurt she'd just endured. In that moment, he silently renewed his promise to protect her, to help her grow strong in a world that wouldn't always see her beauty. "Miss Johnson?" The receptionist's voice was gentle. "They're ready for your interview now." Marcus pulled back from the hug, looking into his daughter's eyes. He saw there not just vulnerability, but also strength, the kind that comes from knowing you are loved completely. Straightening her yellow ribbon one last time, he stood and took her hand. As they walked toward the interview room, Marcus held his daughter's hand firmly, each step a declaration of love and protection. The waiting room remained silent behind them, the morning sun still streaming through those tall windows, but something in the air had changed. Sometimes, he thought, the quietest voices could speak the loudest truths. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the Johnson family kitchen as Marcus stood at the stove, stirring a pot of his famous 3-bean chili. The warm, spicy aroma filled their modest home, mixing with the scent of freshly baked cornbread. Aaliyah perched on a kitchen stool, her feet swinging back and forth as she chattered excitedly. "And they have a real theater, Daddy? With curtains and everything?" Her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "Miss Peterson said they do 2 plays every year. Do you think I could try out?" Marcus smiled, his heart warming at his daughter's excitement. The interview earlier that day had gone surprisingly well, despite the incident in the waiting room. "Of course you can, sweetheart. You'd light up any stage you step on. And there's this huge library," Aaliyah continued, hugging her knees to her chest, "with big, comfy chairs and thousands of books. Jenny from my old school says her cousin goes there, and they even have a reading club." Marcus nodded, adding a pinch more cumin to the chili. "Sounds perfect for my little bookworm." The phone's sharp ring cut through their conversation. Marcus wiped his hands on a dish towel and reached for the cordless handset mounted on the wall. "Johnson residence. Mr. Johnson? This is Margaret Blackwood, Director of Admissions at Bradford Academy." The voice was warm and professional. Marcus's hand tightened slightly on the phone. "Yes, Mrs. Blackwood. Thank you for calling." Aaliyah sat up straighter, her eyes wide with anticipation. Marcus gave her a reassuring wink, though his own heart was racing. "I'm calling with wonderful news," Mrs. Blackwood continued. "We were extremely impressed with Aaliyah today. Her academic records are outstanding, and her interview responses showed remarkable maturity and creativity. We would be delighted to offer her a place in our incoming 4th grade class." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, saying a silent prayer of thanks. "That's wonderful news, Mrs. Blackwood. Thank you. There's more, Mr. Johnson. Your words this morning in our waiting room, they made quite an impression. We believe your perspective would be invaluable to our community. We'd like to invite you to join our parent advisory board." Marcus leaned against the counter, processing her words. "I'm honored, Mrs. Blackwood. Truly." After discussing a few details and scheduling a follow-up meeting, Marcus hung up the phone. He turned to find Aaliyah practically vibrating with anticipation. "Well?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus's face broke into a wide grin. "Pack your backpack, baby girl. You're going to Bradford Academy." Aaliyah squealed and launched herself off the stool, throwing her arms around her father's waist. "Really? Really, really?" "Really, really," Marcus laughed, lifting her up and spinning her around. "And guess what else? Your daddy's going to be on their parent board." "What's that mean?" "It means I get to help make the school even better for all the students." Marcus set her down and returned to the stove, giving the chili a quick stir before it could stick. "Now, let's celebrate with some dinner." Later that evening, after their celebratory meal, Marcus followed their usual bedtime routine. Aaliyah was already in her purple pajamas, her hair freshly braided for the night. She knelt beside her bed, hands clasped, with Marcus kneeling beside her. "Dear God," Aaliyah began, her voice soft but clear, "thank you for helping me get into my new school. Please help me make lots of friends and do good in my classes. And thank you for my daddy, who's the best daddy ever. Amen. Amen, Marcus echoed, tucking her into bed. He smoothed her covers and sat on the edge of her mattress. I'm so proud of you, baby girl. You know that? Aaliyah nodded, smiling sleepily. I'm proud of you too, Daddy. You're going to be the best parent board person ever. Marcus chuckled and leaned down to kiss her forehead. Get some sleep, princess. Love you to the moon and back. Love you to the stars and beyond, Aaliyah mumbled, already drifting off. Marcus watched her for a moment longer, then quietly left her room, leaving the door cracked just the way she liked it. He padded down the hallway to his own bedroom, where moonlight filtered through the curtains. On his dresser stood a silver frame holding a photograph of Maria, his late wife. Her smile was radiant, her eyes full of joy as she held a toddler Aaliyah on her hip. Marcus picked up the frame, running his thumb along its edge. We did it, baby, he whispered to the photograph. Our girl's going to get every opportunity we dreamed of for her. His throat tightened as he looked at Maria's face. I wish you could see her now. She's so much like you, strong, beautiful, full of light. He touched the glass gently. I promise you, I'm going to make sure she has every chance to shine. The Monday morning sun painted the prestigious Oakwood Academy's stone facade in warm golden light. Marcus's weathered sedan looked out of place among the line of gleaming luxury cars in the drop-off lane. He pulled up to the curb, taking a deep breath before turning to Aaliyah in the back seat. His daughter sat perfectly still, her new backpack clutched tightly to her chest. The sparkly purple unicorn keychain, a special first-day gift from her father, dangled from the zipper. Her braids were neatly done, each one tied with a pristine white ribbon that matched her crisp uniform. Ready, sweetheart? Marcus asked softly. Aaliyah nodded, but her wide eyes told a different story. Marcus stepped out and opened her door, holding out his hand. She took it immediately, gripping it with the nervous energy of a child stepping into unknown territory. As they walked toward the entrance, students streamed past them in pressed uniforms bearing designer labels. A girl about Aaliyah's age strutted by in shoes that probably cost more than Marcus's entire monthly grocery budget. He felt Aaliyah press closer to his side. Remember what we talked about? Marcus whispered, squeezing her hand. You're exactly where you belong. They made their way through the impressive lobby with its marble floors and crystal chandelier. Aaliyah's Mary Jane shoes clicked softly against the polished stone. A few parents turned to stare, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and something else Marcus chose not to name. Outside classroom 4B, a warm-faced woman with silver-streaked dark hair stood greeting students. Her smile reached her eyes when she saw them approaching. You must be Aaliyah Johnson, she said, kneeling to meet Aaliyah at eye level. I'm Mrs. Hernandez. I'm so excited to have you in my class this year. Aaliyah's grip on Marcus's hand loosened slightly. Hi, she said softly. I love your backpack, Mrs. Hernandez continued. Purple is my favorite color too. And is that a unicorn I see? A tiny smile tugged at Aaliyah's lips. Her name is Sparkles. What a perfect name, Mrs. Hernandez straightened up and extended her hand to Marcus. Mr. Johnson, welcome to Oakwood. I've heard wonderful things about you and Aaliyah from the admissions board. Marcus shook her hand, grateful for the genuine warmth in her voice. Thank you for having us. A small commotion drew their attention as two students bounded up to Mrs. Hernandez. One was a girl with wild red curls, the other a boy wearing thick-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Hernandez, the girl exclaimed. Is it true we're doing the solar system project this week? Yes, Emma, we certainly are. Mrs. Hernandez gestured to Aaliyah. This is your new classmate, Aaliyah. Maybe she'd like to join your project group? Emma's face lit up. Do you like space? She asked Aaliyah. I have glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling, Aaliyah offered quietly. Cool, the boy with glasses chimed in. I'm David. I have a telescope at home. Maybe you can come see it sometime? Marcus watched as Aaliyah's shoulders relaxed slightly. She glanced up at him, and he gave her an encouraging nod. I'd like that, she said, her voice growing stronger. Mrs. Hernandez clapped her hands together. Perfect. Emma, David, Why don't you show Aaliyah where to put her backpack and introduce her to the rest of the space team? Aaliyah looked up at Marcus one last time. He knelt down and gave her a quick hug. Have an amazing day, baby girl. I'll be right here at 3 o'clock. Promise? Promise. He watched as Emma gently took Aaliyah's hand, leading her into the classroom while chattering about planets and stars. David followed, already explaining something about Jupiter's moons. Mrs. Hernandez touched Marcus's arm lightly. She'll be just fine, Mr. Johnson. I'll make sure of it. Marcus nodded gratefully. Thank you, Mrs. Hernandez. Really. Walking back through the lobby, his steps felt lighter. Maybe this would work out after all. Maybe Aaliyah would find her place here, make real friends, get the education she deserved. He pushed open the heavy front doors, squinting in the bright morning Sunday. As he approached his car, Marcus smiled to himself. We made it, baby girl, he whispered, fishing his keys from his pocket. But as he glanced in his rear-view mirror, his smile faded slightly. A group of well-dressed parents stood near the entrance, heads close together, shooting pointed looks in his direction. Their whispers might have been silent from this distance, but their glares spoke volumes. Marcus gripped his steering wheel tighter, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb. He kept his eyes focused straight ahead, leaving the whispers and stares behind him. Marcus hummed along to gospel music, playing softly on the kitchen radio as he stirred a pot of his famous mac and cheese, Aaliyah's favorite comfort food. The front door opened, and he heard the familiar thud of her backpack hitting the floor. Baby girl, how was your first day? He called out cheerfully. Usually, Aaliyah would burst into the kitchen, words tumbling out as she shared every detail of her day. But tonight, only silence answered. Marcus lowered the heat on the stove and walked to the entryway. Aaliyah stood there, head down, fingers playing with the hem of her uniform skirt. His heart squeezed at the sight. Come here, sweetheart. He opened his arms, and she walked into them slowly. Want to tell Daddy what's wrong? Aaliyah buried her face in his shirt. Some kids at recess. Her voice came out muffled. They said my hair looks weird. And she took a shaky breath. A girl named Madison told everyone not to play with me because I'm too dark. Marcus closed his eyes, fighting back the surge of anger and hurt. He'd known this moment would come, but nothing could have prepared him for the pain of hearing those words from his daughter's lips. He guided her to the couch and sat down, pulling her onto his lap like he used to when she was smaller. Look at me, Aaliyah. He waited until her wet brown eyes met his. Do you remember what Mommy used to say about our skin? Aaliyah sniffled. That it's like rich chocolate. That's right. And what does chocolate do? A tiny smile tugged at her lips. It makes people happy. Exactly. Marcus ran his hand over her braids. And these beautiful braids are a crown passed down from your great-grandmother, to your grandmother, to your mommy, and now to you. They tell the story of strong, beautiful black women who held their heads high. He reached for the small mirror on the side table, the one that had belonged to his late wife, Sarah. Now, I want you to look in this mirror and tell me what you see. Aaliyah glanced at her reflection reluctantly. I see me. Let me tell you what I see, Marcus said softly. I see eyes that sparkle like stars when you laugh. I see a smile that lights up rooms. I see skin that glows like sunset on a summer evening. But most importantly, he tapped her chest gently. I see a heart full of kindness and a mind full of brilliant thoughts. Tears rolled down Aaliyah's cheeks, but her shoulders straightened a little. Really? Really? Marcus wiped her tears away. Now, repeat after me. I am beautiful. I am beautiful, Aaliyah whispered. Louder, baby girl. Let your heart hear it. I am beautiful. I am smart. I am smart. I am worthy of love and respect. I am worthy of love and respect. With each affirmation, Aaliyah's voice grew stronger. Marcus felt his own childhood memories surface, the taunts, the exclusion, the days he'd come home trying to hide his tears from his own parents. But where his parents had told him to ignore the bullies and keep his head down, he would teach his daughter to stand tall. They continued their affirmations until the timer for the mac and cheese beeped. Over dinner, Aaliyah's spirit lifted as they talked about Mrs. Hernandez's kind welcome and a girl named Sophie who had shared her colored pencils. Marcus listened intently, making mental notes of both the good and concerning details. After dinner, they followed their nightly routine: homework, a story, and prayers. As Marcus tucked Aaliyah into bed, she grabbed his hand. "Daddy, will it always hurt this much?" Marcus's heart ached. "No, baby girl. You'll grow stronger, and you'll learn that people who judge by color are the ones missing out on knowing your beautiful spirit." He kissed her forehead. "Want me to leave the starry night light on?" "Yes, please," she yawned, clutching her favorite stuffed giraffe. "Love you, Daddy. Love you more, Princess." Once Aaliyah was asleep, Marcus sat at his desk, opening his laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank email addressed to the Parent Advisory Board. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he struggled to find the right words. "Dear board members," he typed, then deleted it. "I wanted to bring attention. Delete. My daughter's experience today. Delete." The words wouldn't come. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he knew too well how such messages could be received. Too aggressive, and he'd be labeled an angry troublemaker. Too passive, and nothing would change. He thought of the whispers in the parking lot that morning, the subtle looks that said he didn't belong. Marcus stared at the blank screen, his finger resting on the keys, caught between his instinct to protect his daughter and his fear of making her situation worse. Marcus adjusted his tie as he walked through the mahogany double doors of Westbrook Academy's executive boardroom. The late afternoon sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished conference table. His dress shoes clicked against the marble floor, a sound that seemed to echo in the tense silence. He was 15 minutes early, just as his father had taught him. In this world, his dad used to say, "You've got to be twice as prepared and twice as punctual." The room slowly filled with other board members, most wearing designer suits that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. Their casual chatter about vacation homes and country club memberships made him acutely aware of the social divide. The three CEOs entered last: Richard Thompson from a national banking chain, James Miller from a tech company, and Stephen Brooks from a real estate empire. These were the same men who had witnessed the waiting room incident. They had seemed moved by his words then, but now their faces were carefully neutral masks. "Let's begin," Richard announced, taking his seat at the head of the table. First item on the agenda: proposed activities for the upcoming semester. Marcus took a deep breath, straightening the folder in front of him. He'd spent nights preparing this presentation, practicing in front of his bathroom mirror while Aaliyah slept. The memory of her tear-stained face from that first day of school strengthened his resolve. "I'd like to propose some initiatives to enhance student inclusion," Marcus began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. He distributed carefully prepared handouts. These activities would celebrate our diverse student body while creating meaningful connections between families. The room grew quieter. A few parents shifted in their leather chairs. "My first suggestion is a cultural heritage festival," Marcus continued. "Each family could share their traditions through food, music, and stories. It would help our children understand and appreciate different backgrounds." He noticed Jennifer Wilson, a marketing executive, nodding slightly. It gave him courage to continue. "Second, I propose starting a mentorship program pairing older students with younger ones, especially focusing on helping new students adjust to our community." Marcus thought of Aaliyah, eating lunch alone that first week. This would create a more welcoming environment for all children. "That sounds time-consuming," Stephen Brooks interjected, his eyes narrowing. "Our students already have packed schedules with academics and existing extracurriculars." Marcus maintained his composure. The time investment would be minimal, just one lunch period per week. The benefits of building an inclusive community far outweigh. "And what exactly do you mean by inclusive?" James Miller cut in, his tone sharp beneath its veneer of politeness. The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt the weight of being the only black person in the room pressed down on his shoulders. He chose his next words carefully. By inclusive, I mean creating an environment where every student feels valued and welcomed, regardless of their background. He gestured to his handout. Studies show that diverse, inclusive environments better prepare students for, "We're already quite diverse," Jennifer Wilson interrupted, though her tone was gentler than James's. "We have several international students from wealthy families in Asia and Europe." Marcus noticed how she emphasized wealthy. He pressed on. "Economic diversity is just one aspect. Our student body should reflect the rich tapestry of our entire community, not just, 'Let's be practical,'" Stephen Brooks interrupted again. "We have standards to maintain. Our reputation is built on excellence," Marcus finished firmly. "And true excellence comes from bringing together different perspectives and experiences." Richard Thompson, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should take these proposals under advisement and discuss them at our next meeting." His tone suggested the discussion was over. Marcus watched as his carefully prepared proposals were shuffled into folders and briefcases with polite murmurs of "interesting ideas" and "food for thought." He recognized the diplomatic dismissal for what it was. The meeting moved on to safer topics: fundraising for a new tennis court, updating the cafeteria's organic food options, planning the annual golf tournament. Marcus took notes mechanically, feeling increasingly like a prop in someone else's performance of inclusivity. When Richard finally adjourned the meeting, Marcus gathered his materials slowly, watching as others filed out in pairs and small groups, already chatting about dinner reservations and weekend plans. He walked toward the door, his folder clutched perhaps a bit too tightly in his hands. Just outside the boardroom, two parents. He recognized them as regular donors whose names graced a wing of the science building, stood huddled near a water cooler. "Honestly," one whispered not quietly enough, "he's just playing the race card. Always have to make everything about that, don't they?" The other replied with a dismissive shake of her head. Marcus's stomach clenched. The words hit him like a physical blow, though he kept walking, head high, just as he'd taught Aaliyah to do. The click of his shoes against the marble floor now seemed to mock him with each step. He thought of his daughter, probably finishing her homework at the after-school program right now. He thought of her bright smile when she talked about her dreams, and how that smile had dimmed after just 1 week at Westbrook. The weight of protecting her while fighting for change felt heavier than ever. The afternoon sun still streamed through the windows, but it no longer seemed warm or welcoming. Instead, it cast harsh shadows that seemed to divide the hallway into light and dark, much like the invisible lines he was trying so hard to erase. The autumn sun had already dipped below the horizon when Marcus pulled into their driveway after work. The porch light cast a warm glow across their modest home's facade, welcoming them back after another long day. Inside, while Marcus heated up leftover chicken soup for dinner, Aaliyah sat at their small kitchen table, unusually quiet as she pushed her green beans around her plate. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Marcus asked, settling into his chair across from her. He noticed how she kept fidgeting with the sleeve of her uniform sweater, something she always did when nervous. "Daddy," Aaliyah started, then paused, her big brown eyes fixed on her plate. "Mrs. Hernandez announced something today in class." Marcus waited patiently, remembering how much his daughter reminded him of her mother in these moments, taking her time to find just the right words. "They're doing The Wizard of Oz for the winter play," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. And I really want to try out." She looked up at him, hope and uncertainty dancing in her eyes. "But I don't know if I should." Marcus felt his heart squeeze. The last few weeks had been tough enough with the subtle exclusion and whispered comments she'd endured. The thought of putting her in an even more visible position made his protective instincts flare up. "Baby girl," he began carefully, "are you sure? That's a big step. And after everything." "Please, Daddy?" Aaliyah's voice grew stronger. "Mrs. Hernandez said I have a beautiful speaking voice. And," she pulled a slightly crumpled paper from her backpack, "I already got the audition script." Marcus took the pages from her small hands, noting how she'd already highlighted several parts. His daughter's determination shone through her shy exterior, just like it always did when she truly wanted something. "Which part were you thinking of trying for?" he asked, thumbing through the pages. "Dorothy," she said quietly, then quickly added, "But I'd be happy with any part, really. I just want to try." Marcus studied his daughter's face. The hope, the fear, the courage it took just to ask. He thought about all the times he'd told her to be proud of who she was, to never let others dim her light. Would saying no now send the wrong message? "You know it'll take a lot of work," he said, watching her nod eagerly. "And some people might not be kind about it. I know, Daddy, but you always say that doing the right thing isn't always easy." She reached across the table and placed her small hand over his. "And being brave means doing something even when you're scared." Marcus felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. When had his little girl grown so wise? He cleared his throat, pushing back the emotion. "All right then," he said, squeezing her hand. "Let's do this." Aaliyah's face lit up like Christmas morning. She jumped from her chair and threw her arms around his neck. "Thank you, Daddy. Can we practice now? Please?" For the next few hours, their small living room became Munchkinland. Marcus helped Aaliyah work through the lines, watching as she transformed from his shy little girl into a confident performer. She twirled and skipped, practicing Dorothy's movements with natural grace. "Toto, I've a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore," Aaliyah delivered the famous line with perfect wonder in her voice, then looked to her father for approval. "That was beautiful, baby girl," Marcus praised, his chest swelling with pride. "Try it once more, but remember what we talked about. Let the audience feel your surprise." They practiced until the wall clock showed 9:30 p.m., well past Aaliyah's usual bedtime. Her eyes were growing heavy, but her excitement hadn't dimmed one bit. "Just one more time, Daddy?" she pleaded through a yawn. Marcus chuckled, scooping her up in his arms. "Time for bed, my little star. We can practice more tomorrow." He carried her upstairs to her bedroom, decorated with butterfly stickers and family photos. As he tucked her into bed, Aaliyah mumbled sleepily, "Do you think Mama would be proud of me?" Marcus kissed her forehead, smoothing back her curls. "She's always proud of you, baby girl. Just like I am." Within minutes, Aaliyah was fast asleep, still clutching the audition script. Marcus stood watching her peaceful face for a long moment, then knelt beside her bed. He closed his eyes, clasping his hands together as he had done every night since she was born. "Dear Lord," he whispered, "please watch over my baby girl. Give her strength when others try to bring her down. Shield her precious heart from those who can't see past their own prejudices. Help her shine with the light you gave her, and protect her from those who'd try to dim it. Amen." He stayed there a moment longer, listening to his daughter's steady breathing, before quietly rising to leave the room. The audition script lay on her nightstand, a testament to her courage and dreams. The old auditorium creaked as Marcus slipped through its heavy wooden doors. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across rows of burgundy seats. He found a spot in the back row, not wanting to make Aaliyah nervous by sitting too close. Other parents dotted the room, most gathered in small clusters near the front, their designer clothes and perfectly styled hair marking them as regulars in this world of privilege. "Did you hear who's trying out for Dorothy?" A woman in a cream cashmere sweater whispered to her friend. Her voice carried just enough for Marcus to hear. "The new girl, Johnson's daughter." "Oh." Her friend's eyebrows rose. "Well, that's ambitious of her." Marcus took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He'd spent the whole previous evening helping Aaliyah prepare, watching her twirl in their living room as she practiced "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." The memory of her determination made him sit up straighter, pride pushing back against the whispers. Mrs. Hernandez, the drama teacher, stood center stage with her clipboard. Next up, Aaliyah Johnson. Aaliyah appeared from behind the heavy velvet curtain, looking tiny on the vast stage. She wore her favorite blue dress, the one her mother had bought her before she passed, and her hair was neatly braided in 2 plaits. Marcus noticed her hands trembling slightly as she took her position. "Whenever you're ready, dear," Mrs. Hernandez said warmly. Aaliyah closed her eyes for a moment, just like they'd practiced at home. When she opened them again, Marcus saw the spark he loved so much, that inner light that reminded him so much of her mother. "Toto, I've a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore," she began, her voice clear and strong. The whispers in the auditorium died down. "We must be over the rainbow." As she continued her monologue, Marcus watched in amazement as his shy little girl transformed on stage. She moved with grace, her expressions perfectly capturing Dorothy's wonder and fear. When she broke into song, her sweet, pure voice filled every corner of the auditorium. "Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high," she sang, and Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. "There's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby." Even the whispering parents had fallen silent. Mrs. Hernandez was leaning forward in her seat, pencil forgotten in her hand. A few rows ahead, Marcus spotted Mr. Thompson, one of the CEOs from the school board, who had slipped in during the performance. His face was unreadable as he watched Aaliyah. When she finished, there was a moment of complete silence before Mrs. Hernandez broke into applause. "That was wonderful, Aaliyah. Simply wonderful." Aaliyah's face broke into a radiant smile, and she did a small curtsy just like they'd practiced. A few other parents joined in the applause, though some remained stubbornly still. After the last audition, Mrs. Hernandez gathered all the children on stage. Marcus could see Aaliyah fidgeting with her dress, trying to stay calm as the teacher consulted her notes. The other parents leaned forward in anticipation. "I've seen some wonderful performances today, Mrs. Hernandez began, but one stood out above the rest. Our Dorothy will be." She paused, smiling broadly. "Aaliyah Johnson." Marcus's heart soared as he watched his daughter's eyes grow wide with surprise and joy. Several children congratulated her, patting her on the back, while others hung back, their parents already pulling them away with tight-lipped expressions. As the auditorium began to empty, Aaliyah ran down the aisle and threw herself into Marcus's arms. "Daddy, did you see? Did you hear?" "I sure did, baby girl." He lifted her up and spun her around, her giggles echoing in the nearly empty space. "You were amazing up there, just like Mama used to sing to me," she whispered in his ear, and Marcus had to swallow hard against the lump in his throat. They walked to the parking lot hand in hand, Aaliyah practically skipping with excitement. As Marcus helped her into the car, he caught sight of Mr. Thompson standing by his luxury SUV, watching them. The CEO's face was set in a tight frown, his disapproval clear even from a distance. But Marcus refused to let that dampen their moment. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Aaliyah began singing again, her voice full of joy and triumph. "Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue." Marcus joined in, their voices blending together in celebration, even as Mr. Thompson's frowning face appeared in his rearview mirror. The school auditorium buzzed with activity as Marcus hefted a wooden backdrop into place. 3 weeks had passed since Aaliyah's audition, and the transformation in his daughter amazed him. She practically floated through their morning routine now, humming show tunes while getting ready for school. "A little to the left, Marcus," called Sarah Thompson, one of the parent volunteers. Unlike some of the other parents, Sarah had welcomed him warmly into the production team. Her son played the Tin Man, and she'd made it her mission to get everyone working together smoothly. Marcus adjusted the backdrop, careful not to scratch the freshly painted surface. The set piece showed a dreamy version of the Emerald City, lovingly created by the art department. "How's that?" "Perfect," Sarah gave him a thumbs up. "You're a natural at this stagecraft stuff." He smiled, wiping his hands on his jeans. "My wife used to do community theater. I picked up a few things helping her." From the stage came the sound of children's voices warming up. Marcus peered around the curtain to see Aaliyah leading the vocal exercises, her confidence growing with each passing rehearsal. Mrs. Hernandez stood nearby, nodding approvingly. "She's really something special," whispered Tom Chen, another parent volunteer whose daughter played one of the Munchkins. "My Katie can't stop talking about how good Aaliyah is at helping everyone remember their lines." Marcus's chest swelled with pride. She practices constantly at home. Sometimes I find her reading lines to her stuffed animals. The afternoon rehearsal flowed smoothly. Aaliyah's voice soared during Somewhere Over the Rainbow, drawing even the busy parent volunteers to pause and listen. Mrs. Hernandez dabbed at her eyes with a tissue when the song ended. "Beautiful, Aaliyah," the teacher called out. "Simply beautiful." During the scene break, Marcus noticed something that made his heart lift. 3 girls who had once whispered behind Aaliyah's back were now sitting with her, sharing snacks and giggling over script pages. One of them, Emma, had even started wearing her hair in braids similar to Aaliyah's. "Your daughters really brought this show together," said David Russell, a father Marcus had initially pegged as one of the skeptics. David's stern businessman exterior had softened over the weeks of rehearsal. The way she helps the younger kids with their parts, she's got real leadership qualities. "Thank you," Marcus replied, touched by the genuine admiration in David's voice. She's always had a big heart. As the weeks progressed, Marcus found himself looking forward to the afternoon rehearsals as much as Aaliyah did. The backstage area became a place where barriers seemed to dissolve. Parents who might never have spoken to each other at pickup time now worked side by side, sharing tools and trading stories about their children's theatrical adventures. Even Mrs. Peterson, who had once clutched her purse tighter when Marcus passed by in the school parking lot, now brought him coffee during the longer rehearsals. "2 sugars, right?" she'd say with a warm smile. The change in Aaliyah was the most remarkable of all. She walked taller, smiled more freely, and her natural warmth drew others to her like moths to a flame. During one rehearsal, Marcus overheard 2 teachers talking in the hallway. "Have you seen the change in Aaliyah Johnson?" one asked. "Night and day," replied the other. "And it's affecting her whole class. The kids who used to keep their distance are now fighting over who gets to sit with her at lunch." That evening, Marcus prepared Aaliyah's favorite dinner: mac and cheese with extra crispy breadcrumbs on top, just like her mother used to make. As they sat at their small kitchen table, Aaliyah could barely contain her excitement about the day's events. "And then Jenny asked if I could help her with her monologue, Daddy." Aaliyah bounced in her seat, her fork forgotten mid-bite. "She said I'm the best Dorothy the school's ever had." Marcus watched his daughter's animated face, noting how her eyes sparkled with joy. "That's wonderful, baby girl. And you know what else?" She leaned forward, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "Today at lunch, Madison invited me to her birthday party next weekend. She said it's going to be a sleepover." "Is this the same Madison who—" Marcus started, remembering the girl who had once made comments about Aaliyah's skin tone. "Uh-huh," Aaliyah nodded, scooping up another forkful of mac and cheese. "She said she was sorry about before. She even asked if I could teach her the songs from the show." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the hot food. "How does it feel, being in the play?" Aaliyah put down her fork, her expression turning thoughtful. "It feels like I finally fit in, Daddy. Like I belong here." She broke into a giggle. "Mrs. Hernandez says I was born to be on stage." Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Your mama would be so proud of you, baby girl. So proud." "Do you think—" Aaliyah hesitated, pushing a piece of broccoli around her plate. "Do you think she can see me when I'm performing?" "I know she can," Marcus said softly. "And I know she's smiling down on you just like I am." Aaliyah beamed, then jumped up to give him a tight hug. "I love you, Daddy." "Love you too, baby girl." Marcus held her close, feeling hope bloom in his chest. The change he'd witnessed over these past weeks wasn't just in Aaliyah, it was in the whole school community. People who had once turned away were now turning toward them, seeing past their differences to recognize the bright spirit of his little girl. As they finished their dinner, Aaliyah chattered about costume fittings and dance steps, her face glowing with excitement. Marcus listened, letting her enthusiasm wash over him. Maybe, he thought, real change was possible after all. Maybe it started with one little girl, one school play, and the simple power of letting love and talent shine through. The school auditorium hummed with excitement as parents, teachers, and students filed in, filling every available seat. Programs rustled, and whispered conversations created a soft symphony of anticipation. Marcus sat rigid in his front row seat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, trying to calm his racing heart. Sarah Thompson leaned over from the seat next to him. "Breathe, Marcus. She's going to be amazing." He managed a tight smile, grateful for her reassuring presence. The familiar scent of wood polish and fresh paint filled the air, remnants of their countless hours preparing the set. Above them, stage lights cast a warm glow across the heavy velvet curtain. Principal Matthews stepped onto the stage, tapping the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our production of The Wizard of Oz." Her voice carried through the packed auditorium. "I want to thank all the parents, teachers, and especially our wonderful students for their hard work." Marcus's eyes drifted to the CEO's wife who had made that cruel comment months ago in the waiting room. She sat 3 rows back, wearing an expensive dress and a carefully neutral expression. Next to her, her husband scrolled through his phone, seemingly uninterested. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the audience. Marcus held his breath as the orchestra, a mix of students and professional musicians, began the overture. The curtain rose, revealing the familiar Kansas farmyard set they'd labored over for weeks. And then there was Aaliyah. She stepped into the spotlight, and Marcus's heart swelled. Her Dorothy costume, lovingly altered by Mrs. Hernandez to fit perfectly, made her look both vulnerable and strong. When she opened her mouth to deliver her first lines, her voice rang clear and true across the auditorium. "But Aunt Em," Aaliyah proclaimed, her expression earnest and compelling, "Toto didn't mean to." She moved across the stage with natural grace, her presence drawing all eyes to her. Even the CEO had put down his phone. As the first act progressed, Marcus could feel the audience being pulled into the story. When the tornado scene began, their greatest technical challenge, the swirling lights and wind effects, worked flawlessly. Aaliyah's performance during the chaotic sequence drew gasps of concern from the crowd. Then came the moment Marcus had been both anticipating and dreading. Aaliyah stood alone in the spotlight, the painted backdrop of the Kansas prairie behind her. The first notes of "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" filled the air. Her voice, sweet and pure, carried every word with perfect clarity. But it was more than just the notes. Aaliyah poured her heart into every line, her face reflecting the longing and hope embedded in the lyrics. Marcus saw tears glistening on Sarah's cheeks beside him. "Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high." Aaliyah's voice soared, and Marcus felt his own eyes growing wet. In that moment, his daughter wasn't just playing Dorothy. She was every child who had ever dreamed of a place where they truly belonged. As the song reached its crescendo, Marcus noticed movement in his peripheral vision. The CEO's wife was dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Several rows back, he could see Mrs. Peterson, who had once clutched her purse tighter around him, completely transfixed, her mouth slightly open in wonder. The performance continued to unfold like a dream. Aaliyah's chemistry with her castmates was magical. She helped the Scarecrow up with genuine kindness, showed real concern for the Tin Man's rusted joints, and demonstrated touching bravery when facing the lion. Her natural warmth made every interaction feel authentic. During the Emerald City scene, Marcus heard whispers of amazement from nearby audience members. "She's incredible," someone murmured. "Such presence for someone so young." The confrontation with the Wicked Witch brought another showcase moment. Aaliyah's performance balanced fear with determination, her voice never wavering as she stood up to the green-faced villain. When she threw the bucket of water, the audience gasped collectively, then burst into spontaneous applause at the witch's dramatic melting. As the story drew toward its close, Aaliyah delivered the famous line, "There's no place like home," with such sincerity that Marcus heard several sniffles from the audience. The curtain fell on the final scene, and for a moment, complete silence filled the auditorium. Then, like a wave-building force, the applause began. One person stood, then another, and another, until the entire audience was on their feet. The applause thundered through the space, punctuated by cheers and whistles. Marcus saw the CEO's wife standing, clapping with genuine enthusiasm, her earlier disdain completely forgotten. The curtain rose for the cast bow, and when Aaliyah stepped forward for her solo bow, the volume somehow increased even more. Flowers were thrown onto the stage, roses, daisies, and carnations, creating a colorful carpet at her feet. Her smile lit up the entire auditorium as she curtsied gracefully. After the final curtain call, Marcus made his way backstage through the crowds of congratulating parents and excited siblings. He found Aaliyah, surrounded by her castmates, all of them still buzzing with adrenaline and joy. When she saw him, she broke away from the group and ran into his arms. Marcus lifted her off her feet, still in her blue gingham dress, her face glowing with happiness and stage makeup. "You shined, baby girl," he whispered into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. "You absolutely shined." Aaliyah squeezed him tighter, and Marcus could feel her heart still racing from the performance. Around them, parents and students offered congratulations, but for that moment, their world consisted only of their embrace. Finally, they made their way through the crowded hallways and out to the parking lot. The spring night was mild, stars twinkling above them as they walked to their car. Aaliyah skipped beside him, still wearing her ruby slippers, too excited to change back into her regular shoes. As Marcus drove them home, Aaliyah hummed softly in the passenger seat, clutching a bouquet of flowers someone had given her. The streetlights cast intermittent glows across her face, highlighting her peaceful smile. The joy of the evening surrounded them like a warm blanket, making the car feel like a cocoon of happiness. The sun painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges as Marcus drove Aaliyah to school. His daughter hummed quietly in the back seat, still riding high from her triumph in the play the night before. She wore her favorite yellow dress, the one that made her feel like a princess, and her braids were tied with matching ribbons. "Can we get ice cream after school today, Daddy?" Aaliyah asked, her voice filled with the innocent joy that always made Marcus's heart swell. "We'll see, baby girl," Marcus smiled, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. Her happiness was contagious, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. But as they turned the corner onto the school's tree-lined street, Marcus's smile vanished. His hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. There, sprawled across the pristine brick walls of the prestigious school, were ugly words sprayed in harsh black paint. Cruel, hateful words. Words that targeted his beautiful daughter specifically, mocking her skin color and calling her horrible names. Marcus slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding. Other parents were already gathered, their phones out, taking pictures and whispering among themselves. A few maintenance workers stood helplessly before the wall, clearly unsure how to proceed. "Daddy?" Aaliyah's voice trembled. "What does that say?" Marcus couldn't answer. He couldn't bear to explain those hateful words to his 9-year-old daughter. But Aaliyah was already reading them, her lips moving silently as she sounded out the spray-painted slurs. Her small face crumpled as understanding dawned. "They're talking about me, aren't they?" she whispered. Before Marcus could respond, Aaliyah burst into tears, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. He pulled the car into the nearest parking spot and climbed into the back seat, gathering his daughter into his arms. "Shh, baby girl," he murmured, rocking her gently. "Those words don't mean anything. They're just ugly marks from ugly hearts." But Aaliyah couldn't stop crying. Her yellow dress was getting wet with tears, and her ribbons had come loose, making her braids messy. "They hate me," she hiccuped. "They hate me because I'm dark." Marcus felt rage building inside him, a fury so intense it made his vision blur. But he kept his voice steady, kept his movements gentle as he held his daughter. He had to be her rock right now, not add to her fear with his anger. Teachers began rushing out of the building, Mrs. Hernandez among them. She approached their car, her face drawn with concern. "Mr. Johnson," she called softly through the window. "I'm so sorry. We're calling an emergency meeting right now." Marcus nodded, still holding Aaliyah. Other students were arriving now, pointing and staring. Some had their phones out, taking pictures of the graffiti. A few were even laughing. His phone buzzed. It was an email from the school administration. "Dear parents, we are aware of the unfortunate incident of vandalism on school property this morning. Please be assured that we take all forms of property damage seriously. The maintenance team is working to remove the graffiti. Classes will proceed as scheduled. Best regards, Administration. Marcus read it twice, his jaw clenching. Not a word about racism. Not a word about protecting students. Not a word about his daughter. He looked up to see the 3 CEOs from the board arriving in their expensive cars. They glanced at the graffiti, then hurried inside without comment. Their silence spoke volumes. Mrs. Hernandez knocked on his window again. "Mr. Johnson, would you like me to stay with Aaliyah while you speak with the principal?" But Aaliyah clutched his shirt tighter. "Don't leave me, Daddy," she pleaded. "Please don't leave me." "I'm not going anywhere, baby," he assured her, though his heart ached to march into that office and demand action. "We're going home today." The drive home was silent, except for Aaliyah's occasional sniffles. The morning sun that had seemed so beautiful earlier now felt harsh and exposing. Marcus kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching his daughter stare blankly out the window, all the joy from last night's performance completely erased. At home, Aaliyah changed out of her yellow dress and curled up on the couch, clutching the teddy bear her mother had given her before she passed away. Marcus made her favorite hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, but she barely touched it. As the day wore on, more emails arrived from the school. Bland statements about investigating the incident and promoting unity. His phone kept buzzing with messages from other parents on the advisory board, most expressing shallow sympathy without any real commitment to change. That evening, as Marcus tucked Aaliyah into bed, she looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. Her voice was small and broken as she asked, "Daddy, am I really not beautiful?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He felt his heart shatter into a million pieces as he looked at his precious daughter, this perfect gift from God, doubting her own worth because of other people's hatred. He gathered her into his arms, holding her as she began to cry again, feeling utterly helpless in the face of her pain. The kitchen felt colder than usual as Marcus stirred his untouched coffee, watching the steam rise in lazy spirals. 3 days had passed since the hateful graffiti appeared, but its ugly shadow still hung over their home like a heavy cloud. The morning routine that once brought him joy now felt mechanical, emptied of warmth. "Aaliyah, honey, time for breakfast," he called up the stairs, his voice carrying none of its usual cheerfulness. The silence that followed squeezed at his heart. "I'm not hungry," came the quiet reply. Marcus closed his eyes, pressing his palms against the cool kitchen counter. His daughter hadn't eaten a proper breakfast since that morning. The light that usually danced in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a wariness that no 9-year-old should know. At work, Marcus found himself staring blankly at his computer screen in the community center office. The outreach programs he normally threw himself into felt distant and meaningless. How could he help others when he couldn't even protect his own daughter? Every few minutes, his phone would buzz with another empty message from the school administration, promises of looking into it and taking appropriate action. But the words rang hollow, just like the CEO's previous shows of support. "You okay, Marcus?" his coworker Janet asked, poking her head into his office. "You've been reading the same email for 20 minutes. He managed a weak smile. "Just tired," he lied, though the dark circles under his eyes told part of the truth. Sleep had become a stranger, replaced by endless nights of worry and replaying that horrible morning in his mind. Sunday arrived with its usual golden morning light streaming through stained glass windows, but Marcus felt none of the peace he usually found in church. He sat in their usual pew, Aaliyah's small hand limp in his, both of them going through the motions of worship. The familiar hymns washed over him without reaching his heart. Pastor Richardson's sermon about overcoming trials through faith seemed to echo off Marcus's protective shell. He couldn't even bow his head to pray, feeling disconnected from the God he'd always turned to in times of trouble. The same God he'd taught Aaliyah to trust in, even after losing her mother. "Brother Johnson," Pastor Richardson called out after the service, but Marcus hurried Aaliyah to the car, avoiding the concerned looks and well-meaning questions from the congregation. At home, Marcus watched his daughter push food around her plate at dinner, her shoulders slumped. The sight of her defeated posture made his stomach clench. She hadn't touched her art supplies in days. The creative spirit that had shone so brightly in the school play now hidden behind a wall of hurt. Maybe, he started, then swallowed hard. Maybe we should look at other schools, baby girl. Aaliyah's fork clattered against her plate. But what about Mrs. Hernandez and my part in the spring musical? The hope that flickered briefly in her eyes made his decision even harder. I just want you to be safe, to be happy. Running away won't make me happy, she whispered, pushing away from the table and disappearing upstairs. Later that night, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, holding Lisa's photograph. His late wife's smile seemed to mock his failure. What would you do? He asked the silent image. I promised to give her every opportunity, but at what cost? The thought of Lisa's disappointment in him burned worse than any racist graffiti. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the email draft to withdraw Aaliyah from the school. The practical part of his brain argued it was the right choice. Protect her now, fight for change later. But his heart remembered her pride after the play, the way she'd started to bloom despite the initial resistance. The clock on his nightstand ticked past midnight as Marcus scrolled to the photo of the graffiti he'd taken that morning. The cruel words blurred through his tears, but their impact remained sharp as ever. Each hateful letter felt like a personal failure, a sign that he'd been naive to think one black father's voice could make a difference in such an entrenched system. His tears fell freely now, dropping onto the phone's screen. He thought of all the prayers he'd whispered over Aaliyah's bed, promising to build her a better world than the one he'd grown up in. Now those prayers felt like empty words, scattered by the harsh wind of reality. Marcus wiped his eyes with his sleeve, but new tears replaced them immediately. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders, not just for Aaliyah, but for every child who might face the same hatred. If he gave up now, withdrew Aaliyah from the school, wouldn't he be letting the bigots win? But if he stayed and fought, how much more pain would his daughter have to endure? The photograph on his phone seemed to taunt him, a stark reminder of how quickly joy could turn to ashes. Just days ago, they'd been celebrating Alia's triumph in the school play. Now, sitting alone in the darkness of his bedroom, that victory felt distant and hollow. He could hear Aaliyah's gentle breathing from across the hall, somehow sleeping despite the turmoil that surrounded them. His precious girl, who'd already lost so much, now forced to question her own worth because of others' hatred. The thought sent fresh tears coursing down his cheeks, dropping silently onto his pajama pants. The light from his phone cast strange shadows on the wall as he stared at the photo again, unable to look away from the ugly truth it represented. Each tear that fell carried the weight of his uncertainty, his fear, and his deep, aching desire to make the right choice for his daughter's future. The church bells chimed softly in the crisp morning air as Marcus sat in his parked car, hands still gripping the steering wheel. The familiar red brick building of New Hope Baptist Church stood before them, its stained glass windows gleaming in the early sunlight. Every Sunday for the past decade, this place had been their sanctuary. Today, it felt like just another building. Do we have to go, Daddy? Aaliyah asked from the back seat, her voice small and tired. She hadn't bothered to put ribbons in her hair this morning, something she usually took such pride in. Marcus caught her eyes in the rearview mirror. Yes, baby girl. Even when our hearts are heavy, this is where we need to be. The words felt hollow in his mouth, but old habits die hard. They walked up the familiar steps, Marcus nodding mechanically to familiar faces. Sister Jenkins reached out to squeeze his arm, her aged face creased with concern, but he couldn't bring himself to stop and chat like usual. Inside, the warmth of the sanctuary wrapped around them, perfumed with the lingering scent of wood polish and old hymnals. They slipped into their usual pew, third row from the front. Marcus noticed how Aaliyah hunched her shoulders slightly, making herself smaller. His heart ached at the sight. The choir began singing Amazing Grace, but for the first time in his life, Marcus couldn't bring himself to join in. Pastor Williams stood at the pulpit, his presence commanding yet gentle. His eyes swept across the congregation, lingering briefly on Marcus and Aaliyah. Today, he began, his rich voice filling the space, we're going to talk about courage, Not the kind that wins wars or scales mountains, but the quiet courage that changes hearts. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He felt anything but courageous these days. In Esther 4:14, Pastor Williams continued, we read, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from another place. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" His gaze seemed to rest directly on Marcus. Sometimes, brothers and sisters, God places us in difficult situations not to break us, but to use us as His voice. The pastor's words began to weave through the sanctuary, speaking of historical figures who stood alone against injustice. He talked about Rosa Parks, whose single act of defiance sparked a movement. About young Ruby Bridges, walking bravely into school amid hatred, her faith sustaining her. One voice, Pastor Williams emphasized, bringing his fist down gently on the pulpit. That's all it takes sometimes. One voice speaking truth in love. One voice standing firm in faith. One voice saying, "This is not right, and I will not be silent." Marcus felt Aaliyah stir beside him. She had been so still throughout the service that he'd almost forgotten she was listening too. Now she sat up straighter, her eyes fixed on Pastor Williams. "The enemy wants us to believe our voice doesn't matter," the pastor continued. "That we're too small, too weak, too alone to make a difference. But God specializes in using the unlikely to accomplish the impossible." The congregation murmured their agreement. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, like ice beginning to crack. When God calls us to speak, Pastor Williams's voice grew softer, more intimate. It's rarely for our benefit alone. Our struggles, our testimonies, our courage in the face of adversity, these things become lifelines for others walking similar paths. Aaliyah's small hand slipped into Marcus's. He looked down to find her big brown eyes gazing up at him, shining with unshed tears but also something else. Understanding. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging gently at his hand. "Maybe our voice can help someone else too." The simple wisdom in her words hit Marcus like a physical force. He squeezed her hand, remembering all the times in history when a single voice had sparked transformation. Remembering his own mother's stories of standing up in times of hatred, how her courage had shaped not just their family, but their entire community. The rest of the service passed in a blur of hymns and prayers, but Marcus barely noticed. His daughter's words kept echoing in his mind, mingling with Pastor Williams's sermon. He thought about other children who might face the same cruel words, the same painful exclusion. He thought about parents who might be fighting similar battles alone, believing they had no allies. As the congregation began to file out, Pastor Williams made his way over to them. He placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Brother Marcus," he said softly, "sometimes our greatest ministry comes through our deepest wounds." Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. But for the first time in days, the weight in his chest felt lighter, more like determination than despair. In the car ride home, Marcus watched Aaliyah through the rearview mirror. She sat taller now, humming softly to herself. A glimpse of his bright, confident girl returning. The morning sun painted golden streaks across her dark skin, and Marcus saw what he should have seen all along. This battle wasn't just about protecting her. It was about creating change that would ripple out to touch countless others. Stopping at a red light, Marcus pulled out his phone. He opened his email and began composing a message to the school board, requesting a school-wide forum to address the recent events. His fingers moved surely over the keys. No hesitation now. The light turned green, and he set the phone aside, a plan already forming in his mind. "What are you doing, Daddy?" Aaliyah asked, curiosity in her voice. "Taking a stand, baby girl," he replied, his voice steady and sure. "Because sometimes one voice is all it takes." Marcus sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by crumpled paper and half-empty coffee cups. His laptop glowed in the dim evening light as he typed, deleted, and typed again. The words had to be perfect. They had to change hearts. "Daddy!" Aaliyah padded into the kitchen in her pink pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Are you still working on your speech?" He looked up and smiled, pushing back from the table. "Come here, baby girl." Aaliyah climbed onto his lap, peering at the screen. "Can I help?" "Actually," Marcus said, hugging her close, "I'd love to practice it for you. You can tell me if it sounds right." He carried her to the living room and stood in front of the mirror above the fireplace. Aaliyah settled onto the couch, pulling her knees up to her chest and watching with bright eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice steady but gentle, "I stand before you not as an angry man, but as a father who watched his daughter shine on stage, only to have her light dimmed by hate the very next day." "That's good, Daddy," Aaliyah nodded. "It makes people understand." Marcus continued practicing, adjusting words when they felt wrong, strengthening them when Aaliyah's face lit up with recognition. They worked together each evening that week, father and daughter united in their mission to make a difference. During the day, whispers followed Marcus through the school hallways when he dropped off Aaliyah. Some parents caught his arm, their faces pinched with worry. "Marcus," Mrs. Thompson pulled him aside one morning, "maybe it's better to let things settle down. You don't want to make trouble." He looked at her kindly but firmly. "Letting things settle means letting hate win. I can't do that to my daughter, or any other child who might face the same thing." Another parent approached him in the parking lot. "Think about Aaliyah," Mr. Peterson warned. "Sometimes it's better to stay quiet." Marcus straightened his shoulders. "I am thinking about Aaliyah, and every child who needs someone to speak up for them." Each warning only strengthened his resolve. At home, he practiced more intensely, letting Aaliyah film him on his phone so he could study his delivery. She became his biggest cheerleader, clapping and offering suggestions with the innocent wisdom only children possess. "Tell them about how Jesus loves everybody the same," she said one evening, "like Pastor David always says." Marcus added her suggestion, marveling at how his daughter's faith remained so pure despite everything. The night before the forum, tension hung thick in their home. Marcus made Aaliyah's favorite dinner, mac and cheese with extra cheese, but barely touched his own plate. His stomach was too tight with anticipation. After dinner, Aaliyah helped him pick out his tie for tomorrow. "The blue one," she decided. "It looks like the sky when God's watching over us." As bedtime approached, Marcus followed their nightly routine. He tucked Aaliyah into bed, smoothing her covers just so. But tonight was different. Tonight, they both felt the weight of tomorrow pressing down. "Time for prayers," Marcus said softly, kneeling beside her bed. Aaliyah reached for his hands, her small fingers intertwining with his larger ones. The gesture reminded him so much of her mother that his throat tightened. "Dear God," Marcus began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for giving us strength when we need it most. Thank you for giving us each other. Thank you for making Daddy brave," Aaliyah added, squeezing his hands. "Lord," Marcus continued, "guide my words tomorrow. Help me speak with love, not anger. Help me open hearts and minds. And please, protect my baby girl's beautiful spirit. And help other kids feel beautiful too," Aaliyah whispered. "Amen," they said together. Marcus kept holding her hands, neither wanting to let go just yet. The moonlight streaming through her window cast a gentle glow on their clasped hands, his dark, strong ones wrapped protectively around her smaller ones. "Daddy?" Aaliyah's voice was quiet but clear. "I'm not scared anymore, because you're being brave for both of us." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "Baby girl, you're the one making me brave. You're the strongest person I know." They stayed like that for a while, father and daughter drawing strength from each other, their prayers filling the quiet room with hope. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but tonight, in this peaceful moment, Marcus felt God's presence surrounding them both, preparing their hearts for whatever lay ahead. The school gymnasium buzzed with nervous energy as parents, teachers, and board members filed in, filling the rows of folding chairs. Fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over the sea of faces, some concerned, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. At the front, a simple wooden podium stood like a lonely sentinel. Marcus sat in the front row, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Aaliyah squeezed next to him, her small fingers intertwined with his. She wore her favorite yellow dress, the one her mother had bought her before she passed, and her braids were tied with matching ribbons. "You can do it, Daddy," she whispered, looking up at him with complete trust. The principal stepped to the podium, clearing her throat. "Thank you all for coming tonight. Mr. Johnson has requested this forum to address some recent concerns." Her voice wavered slightly. "Mr. Johnson, please." Marcus stood slowly, straightening his tie. His shoes echoed against the hardwood as he approached the podium. Behind him, the 3 CEOs sat stone-faced in their expensive suits. The woman who had whispered about Aaliyah that first day was there too, partially hidden behind her husband. His hands trembled slightly as he placed his notes on the podium. The microphone squealed with feedback, making several people wince. Marcus took a deep breath, looking out at the crowd. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I'm not here tonight to point fingers or assign blame. I'm here as a father." He paused, letting the words settle. "When my wife died 3 years ago, I made her a promise. I promised to give our daughter every opportunity to shine, to grow, to become the amazing person God created her to be." He glanced at Aaliyah, who sat straight-backed and proud, despite her obvious nervousness. "Last week, someone painted hateful words on these walls. Words aimed at my 9-year-old daughter, words that no child should ever have to see." An uncomfortable rustling swept through the crowd. Several parents shifted in their seats. "But this isn't just about graffiti," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "It's about the whispers in hallways, the turned backs at pickup time, the birthday party invitations that never come, the subtle messages our children receive every day about their worth based on the color of their skin." He pulled out his phone, his hands steady now. "This is a picture I took the morning after my daughter's beautiful performance in the school play. The same performance many of you applauded." He held up the screen, showing the cruel graffiti. Several people gasped. One mother covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "That night, my little girl asked me if she was beautiful." Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "My daughter, who had just moved an entire audience to tears with her talent, questioned her own worth because of hate." The silence in the gymnasium was absolute now. Even the usual creaking of chairs had stopped. "I've heard people say we're playing the race card," Marcus continued, looking directly at the board members. "But this isn't a game. This is about our children's hearts, their spirits, their faith in humanity." He turned a page in his notes, but then pushed them aside. "You know, every night before bed, Aaliyah and I pray together. We pray for this school. We pray for every child here, including those who've been unkind to her. Because that's what my wife would have wanted. That's what faith calls us to do." Tears were flowing freely now among the audience. One of the CEOs removed his glasses, wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. "I don't want special treatment for my daughter," Marcus said firmly. "I want equal treatment. I want every child in these halls to feel safe, valued, and worthy. Because that's not just my daughter's future at stake, it's all of our futures." He gripped the sides of the podium. "Change starts with honesty, with courage, with admitting there's a problem and being brave enough to face it. I'm asking you tonight, not as an angry man, but as a father who loves his daughter, to stand with me, to make this school truly worthy of all our children." The gymnasium remained silent for several long moments after Marcus finished. Then, slowly, the CEO who had wiped his eyes stood up. "Mr. Johnson," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I speak for myself and my colleagues when I say we've failed you and Aaliyah, and we're going to fix that." He turned to face the crowd. "Effective immediately, we're establishing a full scholarship fund for minority students. We're implementing mandatory diversity training for all staff and students. And we're creating a zero-tolerance policy for any form of discrimination." The second CEO stood as well, nodding firmly. "We're also allocating resources for a comprehensive anti-bullying program." The third CEO, the one who had been most resistant, rose slowly. "And we'd like you, Mr. Johnson, to head our new Diversity and Inclusion Committee with full board voting rights." A wave of applause started in the back of the gymnasium and rolled forward like thunder. Parents stood, many still wiping tears from their eyes. Teachers nodded enthusiastically. Even the woman who had whispered that cruel comment months ago was standing, her face transformed by shame and understanding. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of months of worry lifting from his shoulders. When he opened them again, Aaliyah was running toward him, her yellow dress bright against the gym's dull floor. She threw herself into his arms, and he lifted her high, holding her close as the applause continued to wash over them. The morning sun streamed through the school's freshly cleaned windows, casting warm patches of light across the hallway floors. Marcus walked through the main entrance, noticing how different the atmosphere felt just 1 week after the forum. Where tension once hung thick in the air, there was now a gentle buzz of positive energy. Mrs. Hernandez stood in the main corridor, pinning up colorful posters announcing the first meeting of the new Student Diversity Club. Her face brightened when she saw Marcus. "The response has been incredible," she said, gesturing to the sign-up sheet already filled with dozens of names. "We had to request a larger classroom." In the teacher's lounge, educational consultants were setting up for another diversity training session. Charts and presentations covered the walls, featuring faces of children from all backgrounds. Marcus glimpsed phrases like creating inclusive spaces and celebrating differences as he passed by. During morning assembly, Principal Matthews addressed the student body with a new warmth in his voice. "This week marks the beginning of our journey toward becoming a truly inclusive community," he announced. The 3 CEOs sat in the back, nodding along, their previous reluctance replaced by genuine commitment. In Aaliyah's classroom, Mrs. Hernandez had rearranged the desks into small circles, encouraging students to interact with classmates they'd never talked to before. The walls displayed student-made posters celebrating their diverse heritages. Aaliyah's contribution, a beautiful collage of African American leaders and artists, held a prominent spot by the door. "Would you like to share your story with the class today, Aaliyah?" Mrs. Hernandez asked gently. Several students turned to look at her encouragingly. Marcus, who had stayed to observe the new classroom dynamics, felt his heart skip a beat. Aaliyah hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her dress. But then she stood, walking slowly to the front of the room. Her voice started soft, barely above a whisper. Sometimes people made me feel like I didn't belong here," she began. Marcus watched as she took a deep breath, drawing strength from somewhere deep inside. "They said mean things about how I look, about my skin and my hair." The classroom fell silent. Every child leaned forward, listening intently. Even the usually restless kids sat still. "It hurt a lot," Aaliyah continued, her voice growing stronger. "But my daddy taught me that God made me beautiful just the way I am. And now I know that being different isn't bad, it's special." A girl in the front row, one who had once whispered unkind words, raised her hand. "I'm sorry, Aaliyah," she said, tears in her eyes. "Your skin is beautiful, like chocolate and sunshine mixed together." Suddenly, another student stood up, then another. Soon, children were sharing their own stories of feeling different or left out. Mrs. Hernandez watched with proud tears in her eyes as her students opened their hearts to one another. "You're so brave," one boy said to Aaliyah. "Can you teach me how to be brave too?" Aaliyah's face lit up with a smile that reached her eyes, the kind of smile Marcus hadn't seen in weeks. Students gathered around her, offering hugs and high fives. Even children who had once avoided her now asked if she would sit with them at lunch. Marcus watched from the back of the classroom, his heart swelling with pride. His daughter stood tall, accepting the hugs and kind words with grace beyond her years. She caught his eye across the room and gave him a tiny wave, her face glowing with newfound confidence. When the final bell rang, Aaliyah practically skipped to the car, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. As Marcus drove them home, he noticed her humming softly, a habit she'd inherited from her mother, one that always showed when she was truly happy. "Did you see how many people signed up for the Diversity Club, Daddy?" she asked, her voice full of excitement. "Mrs. Hernandez said I can help lead some of the activities." Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror, taking in his daughter's radiant expression. The shadow that had dimmed her spirit was lifting, replaced by something stronger, not just happiness, but pride in who she was. She no longer slouched to make herself smaller or avoided eye contact. Instead, she sat straight, her head held high, her smile genuine and bright. Traffic moved slowly through the afternoon rush, but Marcus didn't mind. Each red light gave him another moment to savor this transformation. As they waited at an intersection, Aaliyah began telling him about her plans for the Diversity Club's first meeting, her hands moving animatedly as she spoke. This was the daughter he remembered, full of life, eager to share her thoughts, unafraid to shine. The cruel words and hateful graffiti had wounded her deeply, but they hadn't broken her spirit. Like a flower reaching for the sun after a storm, she was blooming again, stronger for having weathered the darkness. "Daddy?" she asked suddenly, her voice thoughtful. "Yes, baby girl? I'm glad we didn't give up. I'm glad we stayed to make things better." Marcus felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, but these were different from the ones he'd shed during those painful nights after the graffiti incident. These were tears of joy, of relief, of profound gratitude for his daughter's resilient heart. The kitchen filled with the warm aroma of Marcus's signature spaghetti and meatballs, Aaliyah's favorite comfort food. She sat at their small wooden table, her legs swinging beneath her chair as she twirled pasta around her fork. Marcus watched his daughter, noticing how her shoulders seemed lighter than they had in weeks. "You did great today, baby girl," Marcus said, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "Speaking in front of your class took real courage." Aaliyah's fork clinked against her plate. "Some kids came up to me after. They said they were sorry about being mean before." She paused, considering her words carefully. "Jenny even asked if she could sit with me at lunch tomorrow." Marcus nodded, his heart warming at the small victory. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You know, sometimes people just need to learn to see with their hearts instead of their eyes. Like in your speech, Daddy, when you talked about how God makes everyone special, exactly like that." Marcus served himself another helping of garlic bread. "You know, your grandmother, my mama, she always taught me that our skin is like rich, fertile soil. It holds the stories of all the strong people who came before us." Aaliyah's eyes lit up with curiosity. "Can we visit Grandma? She tells the best stories." Marcus checked his watch. It was only 6:30 p.m. "You know what? That's a great idea. Let me give her a call." 20 minutes later, they pulled up to his mother's modest brick house, its porch warm and welcoming with soft yellow light spilling from the windows. Before they could even knock, the door swung open, and Marcus's mother stood there beaming, her silver hair caught in the porch light. "Well, if it isn't my two favorite people in the whole world." She wrapped Aaliyah in a tight hug, then pulled Marcus down to kiss his cheek. Come in. I just made some sweet potato pie." The living room was exactly as Marcus remembered from his childhood, worn but comfortable furniture, family photos covering every wall, and the gentle tick-tock of his father's old clock on the mantel. His mother settled into her favorite armchair, patting the space beside her for Aaliyah. "Your daddy tells me you've had quite a week, baby," she said, running her hand over Aaliyah's braids. "Made me proud, hearing how you stood up and shared your story with your classmates." Aaliyah leaned into her grandmother's touch. "Some people were mean before, Grandma. They said ugly things about how I look." Marcus's mother's face grew serious, but her eyes remained gentle. "Let me tell you about your great-great-grandmother, Sarah," she said, reaching for an old photo album from the side table. Now she was a woman who knew her worth. She opened the album to a sepia-toned photograph of a proud-looking woman in a high-collared dress. Sarah taught herself to read when it was dangerous for our people to do so. She'd practice by candlelight, using scraps of newspaper. When people told her she couldn't or shouldn't, she'd say, "God gave me this mind to use, and use it I will." Aaliyah traced the photograph with her finger. "She looks so strong." She was strong, baby, and that strength, it runs in your veins, too. His mother turned another page, pointing to a photo of a young woman in a graduation cap. "And here's my mama, your great-grandmother Rose, first black teacher in her county. People said all sorts of cruel things, But she held her head high and taught those children with love. Marcus watched as his daughter absorbed these stories, seeing her spine straighten just a little with each one. His mother continued, weaving tales of resistance, dignity, and triumph through generations of their family. "You see, baby," his mother said, closing the album gently, "when people try to make you feel small because of how God made you, remember these women. Remember how they stood tall, how they knew their beauty came from something deeper than what eyes can see." She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small wooden box. Inside was a delicate gold chain with a tiny cross pendant. This was Sarah's. She wore it every day to remember who she was, a child of God, beautiful and worthy. "I think it's time it had a new keeper." Aaliyah's eyes widened as her grandmother fastened the chain around her neck. "Really? For me? For you, sweet girl. Because you're part of this strong line of women. When you wear it, remember that you carry their strength with you." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes as he watched his daughter touch the pendant reverently. His mother caught his eye and smiled, a knowing look passing between them. They spent the next hour looking through more photos, his mother pointing out family features Aaliyah shared, the same determined chin as Aunt May, the same bright eyes as Cousin Pearl. With each story, each connection, Aaliyah seemed to glow a little brighter. When they finally headed home, the night air was cool and sweet. Aaliyah was quiet in the car, but it was a different kind of quiet than before, thoughtful rather than sad. At home, while Marcus cleaned up the dinner dishes, Aaliyah sat at the kitchen table with her pink journal, the one she'd gotten for her birthday. She wrote carefully, her tongue poking out in concentration. Then she held up the page for Marcus to see. There, in her neat 9-year-old handwriting, were the words, "I am beautiful because God made me this way." The school auditorium buzzed with anticipation as parents and students filed in for the morning assembly. Marcus adjusted his tie, sitting in the third row among other parents. Some nodded warmly at him, the same ones who had once averted their eyes in the hallways. Through the crowd, he spotted Mrs. Hernandez giving last-minute instructions to the student speakers near the stage. Aaliyah stood among them in her pressed Navy school uniform, hands clasped behind her back. Her braids were tied with yellow ribbons that matched the school colors, something she'd insisted on that morning. "To show we're all one school, Daddy," she'd explained while he braided her hair. Principal Matthews stepped up to the microphone, her voice carrying across the packed auditorium. "Today's assembly is about courage, kindness, and the strength we find in our differences. Our students have prepared speeches about what these values mean to them." Marcus watched 3 students speak before Aaliyah. A boy with glasses talked about being teased for his stutter. A girl in a wheelchair shared her story of finding friendship despite feeling different. Each story touched hearts, drawing supportive applause. When Aaliyah's turn came, she walked to the podium with steady steps. She had to stand on a small platform to reach the microphone, but her presence filled the room. Marcus held his breath, remembering how she'd practiced in their living room for days. "Good morning," Aaliyah began, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Aaliyah Johnson, and I want to talk about beauty." She paused, looking directly at the audience. Sometimes people think beauty only looks one way, but that's like saying the sky is only beautiful when it's sunny. A few parents shifted in their seats. Marcus noticed the CEO's wife who had whispered that cruel comment months ago. She was listening intently now, her expression soft. "When I first came to this school, some people made me feel like I didn't belong because of how I look." Aaliyah's voice wavered slightly, but she pressed on. "It hurt, but my daddy taught me something important, that God makes everyone beautiful in their own way." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. 2 rows ahead, Mrs. Hernandez dabbed at her cheeks with a tissue. "I learned that being brave isn't about not being scared," Aaliyah continued. "It's about doing what's right even when you are scared. And being kind isn't just about being nice. It's about helping others feel beautiful too." She shared how the drama teacher had believed in her, giving her the lead role in the play. How some classmates had started standing up for her when others were unkind. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke about the changes she'd seen in the school. "Now, when I look in the mirror," she said, smiling, "I don't just see my dark skin or my braids. I see someone who is strong. Someone who can help others feel strong too." She glanced at Marcus, her eyes shining. "My daddy says that's what real beauty does. It gives others courage to shine." The applause started before she finished her last word. It rolled through the auditorium like thunder, parents and students rising to their feet. Marcus stood too, tears flowing freely now. He saw the 3 CEOs from the board clapping vigorously, genuine emotion on their faces. Students rushed to hug Aaliyah as she stepped down from the podium. Jenny, who had once joined in teasing her, was the first to reach her, wrapping her in a tight embrace. Other parents approached Marcus, squeezing his shoulder or shaking his hand. "Your daughter is remarkable," said Mrs. Chen, a mother who had previously kept her distance. "She's taught us all something important." As the assembly dispersed, Marcus made his way through the crowd to Aaliyah. She ran to him, and he scooped her up in his arms, holding her close. Her small arms wrapped around his neck, and he could feel her heart beating against his chest. "You didn't just survive," he whispered in her ear, his voice thick with emotion. "You changed hearts." Aaliyah pulled back slightly, her face glowing. "We changed hearts together, Daddy," she said. Around them, the auditorium continued to buzz with conversation and movement, but in that moment, it was just father and daughter, holding each other in the warmth of their shared victory. Mrs. Hernandez approached them, beaming with pride. "Aaliyah, your words touched everyone here today. This is exactly why we chose you to represent your class." Marcus set Aaliyah down but kept his hand on her shoulder, watching as more students and parents gathered around them. The CEO's wife, who had once whispered that cruel comment, now stood nearby, tears in her eyes, waiting for a chance to speak to them. The morning light streamed through the high windows of the auditorium, casting warm patches on the floor. In that light, Marcus could see how far they'd come from that first day in the waiting room. His daughter stood tall now, her smile bright and genuine, no longer shadowed by doubt or fear. The spring breeze carried the sweet scent of cotton candy and popcorn across the school grounds. Marcus Johnson walked hand in hand with his daughter Aaliyah through the bustling fair, their footsteps in perfect sync on the grassy lawn. Colorful banners fluttered overhead, and the sounds of children's laughter mixed with upbeat music filled the air. "Look, Daddy." Aaliyah pointed excitedly at a face painting booth where Mrs. Hernandez was creating butterfly designs on children's cheeks. "Can I get one?" Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "Of course, baby girl." As they waited in line, Marcus noticed how different things felt from just a few months ago. The same parents who had once whispered and stared now greeted them warmly. The CEO's wife, who had made that cruel comment in the waiting room, now stood nearby, helping at the bake sale table. When she caught Marcus's eye, she gave a small, apologetic nod. Aaliyah chatted happily with 2 classmates in line ahead of her. One of them, a little blonde girl named Sarah, touched Aaliyah's braids admiringly. "Your hair is so pretty today. Can you show me how to do those beads sometime?" Marcus's heart swelled as he watched Aaliyah's face light up. "Sure. My grandma taught me. She says it's part of our heritage." When it was Aaliyah's turn, Mrs. Hernandez welcomed her with a warm hug. "What design would you like, sweetheart?" "A rainbow butterfly," Aaliyah declared, "with lots of colors." As Mrs. Hernandez worked, Marcus found himself lost in thought, remembering their journey. He could still feel the sting of that first day in the waiting room, the weight of prejudice pressing down on his little girl's shoulders, the hateful graffiti, the tears, the moments when he'd questioned whether they should stay and fight. It all seemed both so distant and so fresh, but faith had carried them through. Marcus remembered that Sunday sermon about one voice making a difference, and how Aaliyah's innocent wisdom had renewed his courage. Their story had touched hearts and opened minds, creating ripples of change throughout the school community. He watched as parents from all backgrounds mingled at the various booths, their children playing together without a second thought about skin color or status. The Diversity Club's booth displayed artwork celebrating different cultures, and Marcus spotted several of the projects Aaliyah had contributed. All done, Mrs. Hernandez announced, holding up a mirror for Aaliyah. It's beautiful, Aaliyah gasped, admiring the brilliant butterfly that now adorned her cheek. The colors seemed to shimmer in the afternoon sunday. They continued their walk through the fair, stopping at different activities. At the ring toss, one of the CEOs, who had once remained silent in the face of discrimination, now cheered alongside them as Aaliyah won a small stuffed animal. His own daughter and Aaliyah had become friends through the Diversity Club, proving that children's hearts were naturally open when given the chance. Near the school garden, they passed the spot where the hateful graffiti had once marred the walls. Now a beautiful mural stretched across the space, painted by students working together. It showed children of all colors holding hands beneath a rainbow, with words of unity and acceptance woven throughout the design. Aaliyah had helped paint part of it. Marcus bought them both ice cream cones, and they found a quiet spot beneath a flowering cherry tree to rest. The setting sun painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges, casting a gentle glow over the fairground. The spring air was cool but comfortable, carrying the promise of new beginnings. "Daddy," Aaliyah said softly, looking up at him with ice cream dotting her nose. "Remember when I used to cry about being different?" Marcus nodded, his throat tightening with emotion. "I don't feel different anymore," she continued, her voice strong and clear. "Well, I am different, but now I know that's good. God made everybody different on purpose, right?" "That's right, baby girl." They watched as families began packing up their booths, the fair winding down for the evening. The fairy lights strung between trees twinkled to life, creating a magical atmosphere. Aaliyah's butterfly face paint glowed in the dimming light, making her look like a mystical creature. Marcus thought about his late wife, wondering if she could see how their daughter had blossomed. He could almost hear her voice saying, "Keep going, love. Keep showing her the way." The challenges weren't all gone, of course. There would always be people who carried prejudice in their hearts. But here, in this space they had helped create, love had won a decisive victory. The school had become a model for other institutions, proving that change was possible when people stood up for what was right. Aaliyah finished her ice cream and stood up, brushing off her dress. The setting sun caught the beads in her braids, making them sparkle like tiny stars. She looked up at her father, her eyes filled with a confidence that hadn't been there before. Her smile radiated pure joy as she said, "Daddy, I know I'm beautiful." Marcus felt tears well up in his eyes as he whispered back, "Yes, baby girl, you always were." What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Marcus Johnson, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.